I saw that there was a Gallup survey. I was reading about it in the New York Times that showed that 15% of Americans had reported using a weight loss drug at any point, and that 11% of the entire freaking country, adults only, were currently taking one. And that, just for a little context, was up from 3% who said they were taking an obesity drug in 2024. Helena, everybody's taking these freaking pills and shots and things.
Yeah, the scale of adoption has surprised me. Like, I knew that this was going to affect food demand, and I knew this was going to be like a major force. I think I've mentioned this before, I started covering it really early because Wall Street analysts were paying attention to this about how it could affect the demand for certain products, because all these companies need to grow every quarter, right? They need to sell more of whatever snack or whatever they are selling. And so I paid attention to this really early, and I knew it would be big. I did not expect it to be this big. 15% of adults already using a GLP-1 or have tried a GLP-1, 11% using them currently is astonishing. And I think it's very likely that we have passed peak obesity, that like it is
Well,
not
that's in the
true
that's
that
in the
the
article.
obesity went down for the first time ever. During the Trump administration, we talked about that recently, but just the scale of adoption, this is going to show up in the population-wide data that we are going to see from CDC. It always lags a bit, but this is an astonishing number. And the food industry is really having to change how it approaches the market because of this.
I want to talk about obesity for a second. I mean, we talked about this on a previous episode about who or what did or did not cause the drop in obesity rates, but it does appear to be dropping after a peak of 39.9% in 2022. We are, according to recent data, at 36.4%. What I thought was interesting, because this did not show up in the previous data that we were talking about, was that the diabetes rate seems to be stabilizing as well. Now, GLP-1s theoretically are anti-diabetes drugs.
Yeah, they were initially developed to be a diabetes drug. Yeah.
Right. But the fact that it is having an impact on obesity and a long-term disease like diabetes, that's some meaningful stuff, man. That is not a minor thing.
I think some of the data around the non-weight loss effects are in some ways they're even more interesting, right? Like some of the stuff coming out about cardiovascular.
Yeah, the
risk
immortality
reduction.
stuff, right? We're all going to live forever on this stuff.
Well, I got a lot of heart disease in my family, so
Yeah, mine too.
I pay attention to
Yeah.
cardiovascular disease risk factors, and also, just the fact that they're seeing such significant reductions, even if people don't lose weight. So even if they're non-responders on losing weight, they can have cardiovascular benefits. And then also there's inflammation benefits. And a lot of this we don't really understand. And it also flags to me, like, how much these metabolic diseases are interconnected, and also how our medical system doesn't always understand how this all works, right? Like, we are still trying to understand how these drugs are even working in all these different mechanisms. It's a fascinating time.
I had an interesting introduction to that. So when I was in graduate school, I had a part-time job doing medical transcription. That was my work to help pay my bills. And this was from my mother, actually, who is a neurologist. And this was back in the old days. I had a little foot pedal thing with a tape where you'd play it and I would just type it up. And so she had a little
From
mini
her appointments?
Yeah, she would tape it. This was pre-medical record, electronic medical records.
Yeah, now it's all AI transcript. Yeah.
It is. At the time, she was somewhat ahead of the curve, where she would tape every interview and then I would write it up. And what I realized especially this is neurology, this is different for the gut, but neurology, it is a lot of art to go along with that science. The doctors who are out there taking care of us, they're acting in very practical ways. They see the symptoms, they take away the symptoms. Hope, that's probably a difficult byproduct of Western medicine, that we're not always treating the systemic problems, but they don't always 100% understand exactly why something does what it does. And this is one of those cases where this is way out in front of knowledge. And who knows? I mean, the two things that sort of crept into popped up in my head when reading about this new data was, one, the widespread use of compounded weight loss drugs. And what that means is just sort of like, custom-made drugs, not Wegovy or Ozempic, not the stuff from the FDA-approved stuff. This is small companies, well, not so small, companies that are making drugs themselves.
Yeah, they're basically mimicking them. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not regulated in the same way. So there's a lot of potential risk there, although it's a lot cheaper, so you can understand why people may use it. And I think also the other thing that's sort of emerged dramatically here, although it wasn't created exactly for this, is direct to consumer pharmaceutical services. So the first one of this, and this was created directly for obesity drugs, is Lilly Direct, so that they could sell you directly the weight loss drugs. I don't totally have a position on that one way or another, but there is a economic profusion of these kinds of companies out there, whether it's Eli Lilly or Hims and Hers, or what's some of the names of these companies, Fridays and Weight Watchers Clinic and RO. We're creating, not only are we creating new pathways of medicine, we're creating very, very different systems to provide care to people, because these are telehealth companies essentially that are sending you these drugs.